All right, perfect. Woohoo.
Woohoo! So is your cat going to make an appearance?
He might. He's in the background right now.
Got it.
I guess I could make him make an appearance. He's looking out the window.
Well, knowing cats, they will pick the right moment to come through.
Yep. Yeah. He likes he likes to make
Cats doing actual circus tricks on Saturday. I never knew you could train cats, but apparently you can. I went to Sephora and they have 3 cats that do tricks.
Is that outside the Galleria?
No, that's downtown on Washington.
Mm.
Some other thing at the Galleria. I know I passed it by and I don't know what it is exactly. Well, if you're already joining us, please go ahead and take the poll. And if you don't mind, we're going to do like a little roll call. If you'd like to put in where you are in the world, that would be great. Just in the chat.
Yeah. Also, I don't expect anybody to turn their cameras on either. Okay. Like, because I don't like that. I don't want to turn my camera on sometimes. So.
Well, I see one face so far, and I appreciate it. I might ask people and put them on the spot to turn them on in the beginning, but that might be too aggressive. All right, so we're at time is 2 minutes away.
Oh, should be.
Iowa.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, Dennis, Michael. If you're just joining us, please take our poll and go ahead and tell us where you are. Hello.
Hey, Jonathan.
Rala. Crazy.
All the way from beautiful Rala. It is beautiful down there. Oops. So many people. This is nice.
It's coffee water.
Oh,
Gotta get caffeinated and somehow stay hydrated at the same time.
wow. Congratulations. Good luck on that.
I'm hearing somebody's, is that your background, Eric?
No, that's Dennis.
Oh, okay. If you're not oh, so many people joining.
Let me know when you want me to begin, Holly, by the way.
I might give it one more minute.
Yes, also please take the quick little poll.
Yes, there's a poll. There is a poll. There is a question to please tell us where you are in the world. And toward the end of the session, I'm going to put up a survey, another poll, I know, for feedback as to how you think it went. That'll help us plan further trainings. And yes, big thanks to Eric. Eric is going with a 2-screen approach as well. So look out. Again, please, if you're just logging in, tell us in the chat where you are and take our poll. Please do.
Just give it a little bit more, and then
All right, so we're at 12:17. Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome.
So here, okay. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you. I'm coming to you live from St. Louis Public Radio into the newly inaugurated Midwest Newsroom branch office here in Grand Center, St. Louis, as we call it. I'm really pleased to see some folks on here, and thank you to Eric Schmid for doing this great presentation. Eric is a census guru. When I worked at St. Louis Public Radio, he was one of my reporters, and so together we discovered the joys of the census. He also covers the Metro East, which in the St. Louis area comprises the Illinois side of the listening area. And he is also well known for a deep dive into when marijuana recreationally became available in Illinois. And he was there the day they opened the first dispensary. Was that right? Like,
yep.
See, it was a weekend. We're both on call, and he was right there to document all of the wonderfulness of it. At any rate, Eric joined St. Louis Public Radio in 2019. Did we decide on that? Yes.
Yep.
As Report for America Fellow. And he's here in a great part of the newsroom here in the public radio family. So Eric, thank you so much for doing this. You're our first brown bag person. If you feel like eating your lunch from your brown bag or whatever you have, feel free to do that. I'd love to see all your faces, but if you want to remain off camera, that's cool as well. I do want to introduce Steve Vachrad, who's on the call. He's our investigative editor for the Midwest Newsroom. Steve, do you want to say hi? There he is, he's on camera. Steve is wearing his casual look on this Friday, it looks like. He often is seen to wear a tie in the KCUR newsroom. So Steve is based in KCUR. I'm here in St. Louis. I don't know if Daniel Wheaton is on the call.
He is.
There?
Yep, he is.
Oh, great. Daniel, do you want to say hi?
Hey everybody, eating lunch, so I'll save you.
He's literally brown bagging it. Daniel is our Midwest Newsroom data journalist. He's based in Lincoln. And I'm very excited that we just hired a senior content editor, Chris Husted, who will be joining us on November 1st. I can say this because he's now tweeted it. I don't know if he's on the call, but he is he's coming to us from KBIA in Columbia, Missouri, and he's going to be working for IPR in Des Moines, although telecommuting from Columbia, Missouri. And we are very close to hiring our investigative reporter to be named. So for those of you who don't know, the Midwest Newsroom is Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska. NPR is our mothership. And we work together we're working together to build this virtual newsroom, if you will, to cover in-depth and investigative reporting for the region. And we just sort of launched, but we'll be growing and doing some work coming up. So look out for that. And the main station, by the way, for the Midwest Newsroom, the home station is KCUR in Kansas City. And if you have any questions, I'm going to put my email address in the chat shortly so that you can drop me a line if you're interested in that. So this is the first of 5 sessions. I'm also going to drop in the chat a little bit later the link that will take you to our full calendar, which will allow you to see what's coming next. We're doing these monthly through February, and then we'll see if we continue or not. But training is part of the Midwest Newsroom's mission. And so we will be doing these types of informal trainings as well as some more rigorous trainings in the new year. So be on the lookout for that. And if you don't think I have your contact information, for example, if you got this from someone forwarding it to you, this invitation, please do drop your email in the chat. And as a reminder, just let us know where you are in the chat and take our poll. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over. I'm recording this, by the way. And we'll have this available online for people who weren't able to make it. So we'll be making that available shortly. But I want to go ahead and hand things over to Eric.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Holly, for inviting me to give this presentation. I honestly, I had a lot of fun making it, and I hope that y'all enjoy it too. And so before we get going, Holly, could you close the poll out just so I can see
Sorry.
some of the responses? I kind of wrote this poll just to get a sense of how I can focus some of the content there.
See it?
Yeah, I'm glad some of y'all want to see my cat. All right, this is helpful. That is great. All right, right before I get going, I think I have one question break slide in here. Feel free to drop questions in the chat as they pop up for you, and we'll address them at that time. I am trusting Holly to monitor that and keep track of it. And and there's a caveat. I might not know the answer to your question, but I'll do my best to answer that. So without anything else in the way, I'm going to get going. So I feel like this presentation grew out of a kind of offhand conversation I had with Holly in the newsroom. And I was just telling her about some of the ideas and my excitement about the census and different ways to look at the data and ways that data can move into stories that are more interesting than just, wow, look, this town grew by this much, or this is what the demographics are in this city. While those stories are important and are noteworthy and worthy for us to produce, they're not the only things that we can do with census information. And what I hope that this presentation can do is take us from this, which is what census information looks like when you look at some of their spreadsheets. They're huge, they're nebulous, they have a lot of moving parts and a lot of numbers. And take it from that and go to this, the stories, the what we can tell about our region, our communities, and the differences there that are interesting, and getting beyond like the just that the US population grew at the slowest pace. Again, that's like an important thing, but we want to go further than that because that story, we can only really tell that once every 10 years. And we want to do more than that. So I think to start off, I think about, what exactly is the census? And it is a once a decade head count. So we're asking everybody in the country to fill out a survey that says who they are, where they live, how many children they have in their house, if their house is rented or owned. There are a lot of demographic information about these certain areas, and some of it can be released. So like what I'm showing now, this racial and ethnic demographic information, housing, number of children, some of this marital info. I know that they got better at incorporating same-sex partnership into the 2020 census, but they could be better with other aspects of the LGBTQ community. And so all of this information is shared. It's anonymous, it's aggregated by race and ethnicity, by age. There's usually a breakdown of voting age population versus children, which is 18 plus or 18 minus, and they also have some senior information. So of course, there's other information that they collect, like commute times and some economic information, so like how much people make, how much a household makes in there. And this information helps the country dole out billions of dollars. There's, between half a billion and between half a trillion and $1 trillion a year is distributed to states, to communities based off of this information. So this is really important for communities, especially ones that have been traditionally underserved, just to get resources and to kind of wave a flag and say, we exist, we need money, we need resources. And yeah, I think Hansi Lolong from NPR reported, this was in 2019, that something on the order of $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years is allocated on this. But one thing that's really important to remember is all of this information, this is just what it is like on, I would say it's what it is on paper. And these are what the numbers are. This is what you kind of see when you open up a spreadsheet. It's just all of these, different data points. And this is helpful for sure. But I think about the census like a reflection, like you're looking in the mirror. Maybe it can show you different things about where the US population is, where it's moving from, where it's moving to, any kinds of trends that are out there. Is this certain demographic group growing at a large pace in a certain area? Is it declining at a certain large pace? And how do those changes look over time? Because the census happens every single year. Yep. All right. Have a guest joining. He's on my lab. But anyway, so the census happens every 10 years, and it can be a really good way to measure change. How did a region change? How does their population change? For example, the St. Louis region, as it is defined by the census, we had about 2.8 million people in 2010, and in 2020 we had about 2.8 million people. And so that represents a certain kind of change in the region. It's not necessarily like large growth, which is what some people might want, but I think that this kind of framing is really important to understand what this data is telling us. And then looking at it through this lens of how things have been changing over time, you can look at where different kinds of demographics are growing or waning, and get into the reasons why. And so another way that I think about this is, like those, like the YouTube videos where someone takes a selfie every single day and it kind of shows how their face changes. And I have one of those that I did from a long time ago that is, you know, you can kind of see how I've changed. Anyway, so I'm going to stop sharing really quickly and get some of this up. All right. Actually, no, I want to continue sharing. That's not what I want to do. All right. So there are some examples of the initial stories that we can do based off of the census, which is just really what does it say? So this is a really important thing for us as reporters to pay attention to, just to lay the groundwork for future stories. If the US population is growing at its slowest pace since the 1930s, there are many other questions that we can ask moving forward from that. And this article does a really good job showing where are the states that are growing the most, you know, Texas, Florida, Utah, Idaho. What are the places that are losing a lot? Puerto Rico, West Virginia, Mississippi, Illinois, and this is a good ground article to write so we can start to understand why are some of these changes happening and where are they happening too. I know, for example, in Illinois, downstate areas and rural areas are seeing lots of population attrition. You know, people moving out, and that can be the basis of a story of, okay, so why might people be moving out of rural areas, and what are some of the key drivers there that we're not necessarily aware of, or that could be shared between different groups. You know, this is another example of an initial article off of the census. You know, we have many more Latino people, more Asian people, more multiracial Americans. And that is important, again, for a basis of, you know, trying to get into the meat of what those mean. And we have some other local ones, like, you know, St. Louis population grew just 1.2%, drops out of the 21st, and then I think this is a really good example of, you know, using the numbers to dive deeper into the communities and kind of show a reflection of who's here. I think the lead in this article is really great. You know, this is not your grandpa's St. Louis. It's wonderful. And this is a really important article to do, but it's not the only one that we can do. Simply showcasing who has moved here, who has decided to make St. Louis their home, or Kansas City their home, or Iowa their home, for example. I guess I feel like sometimes people stop after these stories. They kind of don't move forward to think about, you know, the other ways that we can use this information. So I think some good examples of using census to tell deeper stories. This is a really good one from Rebecca Rivas over at the Missouri Independent. You know, she took a look at, we know that the census is showing that the Latino population here, the Hispanic population, is growing. And it asks a really good question about, what does that actually mean for the community that is in Missouri? And in the article, she talks about how the Latino community here needs to translate for Spanish-speaking patients. And this has been something that has been going on since 2000. We can build a story that looks at, okay, so look, you know, 2000 census came out, shows that the Hispanic population in Missouri had nearly doubled since 1990. And we can use those kinds of building blocks to show, okay, this is a group that is growing, and we know this from the census. And we can go further and look at, what are some of the issues here? What are some of the challenges that this community faces, especially if it's set to keep on growing? Does this track with the things that we're with the things that we're seeing. And that's just one example. You can do this with other minority groups that are growing. For example, the Asian community also has lots of concerns about language access in the state. These are answers or things that you find out by talking with people in the community, but you can focus it through the census by understanding what the trend is, if it's growing, if it's waning, and those can help inform more specific and directed questions. I think that this article that I ran about a month ago, I think it's a little of both. It is definitely an initial story about showing what the numbers are, but this came out after Janelle O'Day's article in the Post-Dispatch, and I wanted to make sure that we looked a little bit more deeper at what these gains and what the changes could mean for the area, because we already know that the region is diversifying. So I think the question that I wanted to answer was, what does that mean moving forward? And one of the key points was Black residents moving out of St. Louis. What kind of impact does that have? Where are people and what are some of the leaders in that space thinking about as it relates to that attrition? And also the language access issue came up with Asian and Hispanic communities here. And of course, that is a full story that I'm sure is present in it's not just present in Missouri, but also Kansas and Nebraska and Iowa as well. Another really, this was early on, this was when Holly was my editor, but this is another kind of deeper story that you can look at and say, with changes that are happening, how does this have an effect on people? And I think another really good example came right before the pandemic really gripped our region. I think this story got swept under the rug a little, but we looked at what kinds of questions the census wasn't asking. And this is the point about LGBTQIA people, is for non-binary, gender non-conforming, some trans people, the census not asking questions about their defined identity can lead to some specific outcomes where, if they're not reflected in the data, then it's going to be really hard for policymakers to decide what how to pass laws, pass legislation that benefits this community, because they're not going anywhere, and we're going to have to wait another 10 years. So I think this is another example of kind of looking at the census and what it can represent, and not just thinking of it as how big is this city and how many white people, Black people, Asian people, Hispanic people, etc., are in this city, but actually trying to get to some other groups and some of the implications of that as it relates to people. And that is where I think we have this question, which is, so how do you go from just the numbers of what is in a city to actually some deeper ideas about communities? And I think the way that you think about this is, the numbers aren't the story here. Of course, the numbers are reflective of what's going on, but people are the story. We want to talk about people. We are, like anybody ostensibly, can look at this census data and look at what's happening in their community and think, wow, it's quite interesting that we see this population group growing here. But simply writing a story that says that, it's not very interesting. This is something I pulled from a presentation that Celeste Headley did for us back in 2019. but it stuck with me, which is we're people talking to people about people. And of course, this is also reflected in NPR's new headline guidance. But I think it's really important to try and move forward from numbers and realize that the census numbers are really just representative of people and what people are doing and what people are moving about and why they're doing this. They can reflect values that we have. If it's somebody moving from St. Louis to St. Louis County because of the education opportunities that are there, or because they feel like they have a more opportunity to be to feel safer in that community, whether it is someone moving like that can have a lot of connotations, but I think that the movement of people from different parts of the region can represent what they value. If that's different kinds of opportunity. Do people in St. Louis, for example, feel like they can live out a productive life and something that advances them, or do they feel like they need to move to a different part of the region or from the region entirely to advance what they want out of life? And of course, there's also community. If you're living in a part of the city or a part of the county that doesn't really look like you don't really feel like you connect. People can seek that out. And these kinds of questions, I feel like make more engaging stories because you're using the census numbers to establish that a trend is happening, that people are moving, that this place is growing or this place is waning, and then you can take a step further and show that it is for these reasons or a shared reason. I think that's where we get more interesting and more engaging stories, because we're not just talking about the numbers, we're talking about human people and their motivations, and we all like a story that has a good character in it or a good set of characters. I think another way that I think about this, I was listening to the You're Wrong About podcast episode, which I hope people I encourage people to check out because it's entertaining. It was one of the Nancy Grace episodes, and one of the hosts, Sarah Marshall, was telling Michael Hobbs, was complimenting him on his work, but says, I really appreciate that you use anecdotes and data and you weave them together, because the data that you have strengthens the anecdotes that you also have, and those two play off each other to make a story that is both deep with information and data, but also is relatable to people who are reading. Also, we need to talk a little bit about geography, because that's how the census data does different designations. And I saw Steve's question, and I'll answer that now. These are the different designations that you want to pay attention to, or that I pay attention to. There's national, there's state, there's county level. Place is how the census defines usually cities or villages. A census defined place has a special they have special spreadsheets that have that. So place is usually where you'll find cities. If you're looking at a county that has a lot of municipalities like St. Louis County or Madison County or St. Clair County, the place is where you'll find the like the cities that you're looking for. I think Steve asked, do census tract boundaries stay the same or change every 10 years? That is not a dumb question. It's a really good one. They do change every 10 years. Tracts are supposed to represent a certain number of people, kind of like how congressional districts have to have a certain number of people in them. Census tracts operate in the same way. I think it's around 3,000 to 5,000 people, but I would need to double check that number. And the tracts, my understanding again, I'll need to double check this, but my understanding is that the census will subdivide a track if it gets more people into it, to make sure that it's at the same level of the same number of people in it. And then tracks are also subdivided by what they call block level, which I think is different from like neighborhood blocks, but it's just a smaller designation of people to try and reveal more information, more specific information about a place. And so I think the way that these are organized right now, it's by the top is the largest population geographic designation, and then breaking it down to the smallest designation. And of course, these have different implications for what's available. The census decides if it's going to share more information or less information depending on the level. Like the national numbers are going to have more, some more detailed, like personal information, because it's all aggregated across the country, and it would be a lot harder to identify someone from the numbers. Whereas like at the block level, you might be dealing with a couple hundred people, or maybe as many as 1,000 people, and if you drill down in that using demographics, using age, using income level, you can learn a lot about a person, or you can identify someone by also the data, other publicly available data. I also want to just get on a little soapbox here and say that I don't like zip codes. I think zip codes are terrible, and I do not like it when people organize data by zip code, because it's really hard. It's hard to transfer between zip codes and census tracts. And so if data is organized by zip code, it can just be really hard to correlate it with other things and figure out what's going on. And unfortunately, a lot of coronavirus information has been coded in zip codes, and I don't like it. Of course, the deferential privacy is a policy that the census has now, that they're trying to shield individuals' personal information by adding noise, adding some factors of error to the smallest census designated geographies. And so that can be, I would be careful to use tracks or blocks right now, especially if you're looking at like demographic information in them, because the data just might not be really solid, and could have more error. So like I would say consult with experts, whether that is in-house data. Yeah, Dan just put something in the chat that is important. But yeah, like there's just a lot of peril there. So be really, really careful if you want to use that track or block data, that you understand that it is actually going to reveal something that you want to see. So now, are there any questions? Anybody? If not, I'm just going to move on to another part, which is just a little bit of demoing. So let's see, is it in here? Yeah, all right, so we're gonna get rid of these. So first off, a place that I've gone to for information it's called Big Local News. This Census Data 2020 Co-op has these comparative spreadsheets that show the difference between 2010 and 2020. They have state, county subdivision, place, and tract. And what one of those looks like when you open it up is it looks like this, which is a lot. There's a lot of garbage in here, and you don't need it. Like, we're not looking at Alabama. So I'm showing you this because this is usually how me, with somebody with minimal, like I don't have coding experience with data, this is how I will start to process through a sheet to get to the information that I want. And first off, I will freeze panes, which is basically, it means that so this cell that I have highlighted, everything on this side of it and everything above it is going to be locked in place. So if I go down the spreadsheet, the top stays in place. And if I go over to the side, this information stays in place. And I want that to stay there so I know which cities or villages I'm looking at, because there are a lot of different columns here that have different information that some of them are going to be interesting and most of them are not going to be interesting. The other really great thing that Excel can do for you is filters. So usually I will pick the top row and I'll add a filter to all of them, which really just lets you have a little drop down and select the state or states that you want to look at. So here, try to find Missouri. So now I have only selected every single thing that is a Missouri census designated place. And that could be cities or villages or a actual designated place. That's really great for just narrowing down. And then from here, this is cumbersome, and I've done this, but you can search for specific cities, and I've compiled like the list of all of the municipalities or what would show up on this sheet in St. Louis County, and I have gone through and like clicked them individually just to pull up that information and that data, because then you can start to do other analyses, like let me see what's here. You can do some quick analyses with this. I'm just going to go over to the 2020 window, and I'm opening up these top little columns to know what they say. So you can go in here and actually I'm going to go a little bit further because I know that there's a change. Okay, here we go. So this spreadsheet in general they have the raw change, which is just the number of people that moved in or out. And so because we have all of Missouri selected, maybe I want to know the place where the most white people moved to, or the place where the most white people, like that gained the most white people in the state. So up here, there's a little sort function that says sort smallest to largest. So like smallest to largest, there we go. This gives you the places where people, so this is obviously, a lot of people moved away from Florissant. And then it kind of goes down and, a lot of white people moved out of Springfield. And then at the very bottom is going to be the largest. And we can say, oops, a little bit too far. That lots of
Acres Express Transport? No, it's not. Sorry.
Right. And so at the very bottom, this is the largest.
Brian, I think you are talking to someone who called you by mistake. I think you're unmuted.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So this kind of a quick sort can be really helpful in identifying potential places to look at. If we know that Kansas City grew, they added 16,000 white people between 2010 and 2020, that can start to lead stories on asking why, and trying to get to the bottom of what's driving that change. And they have all of the other demographic groups here. So this one is Hispanic. The next to it is the Black population. You have Asian populations, and of course, like it says, like non-Hispanic because of how the census breaks out data. I find that this can be a really good way to get to the root of a story, because you can start to identify the places that you might want to go to that are in the area that are in your coverage area, where it's like, I know on this one, let's just sort this row for the Black population. Florissant had almost 10,000 Black residents move into it. There is a story there, and we can go back to what I said about the values. If 10,000 people are moving into Florissant, 10,000 Black people, that is, are moving into Florissant, there's got to be a good reason for them to want to go there. And I'm sure that it's definitely complicated and complex, and there are many different moving parts to that. But that is a story that we can go deeper on, especially one that we identified in the kind of initial reporting that I did. So this is kind of getting to using filters in Excel to get to the state and the place level can be really helpful in just figuring out if something is there and if something is worth for you to ask questions about and move forward in. And then the data is also there, and you can build a little bit of some numbers into the story to say, like, wow, we have 10,000 people, 10,000 Black residents moving into Florissant, and this is what this means, and et cetera there. And that is some basic just Excel work that you can do. Usually when I do this, I like to when I am finished with all the filtering, I will hit the little arrow there, and that selects everything, and I'll copy the whole sheet, and I'll add another one, and I'll paste it there to try and make sure that I'm not messing around with the original data. Please be aware, if you do this, make sure that you save the file as an Excel spreadsheet and not as a comma separated value or CSV spreadsheet, because if you do the CSV one, you'll lose the original data. All right, and I think the other thing that I wanted to talk about was just data dictionaries too. This is where
we have a good question, actually.
Okay.
It might be a good spot to change. Are there any like trite or tried and true, or like we're so over it bad census idea stories that are kind of like it's been done, or there's no point that you can think of?
That's a good one. I don't I mean, I think what I think about that is the framing more than anything. This place is on the kind of alarmist reporting, where it's like, we're declining and this is horrible, and this is the worst thing in the whole world, that that St. Louis might drop below 300,000 people. I think it's more about the framing and what kind of a story that you're trying to tell with it. Is it something that's interesting, or is it something that's kind of like boring and not necessarily helpful? That's what I tend to think about. Or like, I guess one would be to stay away from would be communities of traditional communities of color that are declining, and writing a story that's like, wow, look at how much population East St. Louis lost. That's really a shame, because that doesn't help. That's really pejorative, and it's pretty disrespectful to the people who are there. The other thing I was going to say is, the data dictionaries are very important, because they tell you, like, in this dictionary refers to this components of change sheet. So it has all of these guys, these column titles up here. This shows you what they refer to. And so what I like to do is have the spreadsheet open on one screen, or and the data dictionary on another screen, or if you don't have two screens, I would print out the data dictionary so you can have it in front of you and just be able to refer to it as you go back and forth between the set, just to make sure that you know what the what the numbers are saying. So that's like a little, I hope that that's helpful in terms of getting people to the next point. So here, the point that I want to get across in this is just asking good questions. So like, what information do you need for the story? Is it the number? Is it the demographic information? Is it voting age population? Is it, you know, children, you know, or under 18 population? What do you need to find? And then that will help drive the sheet that you end up looking at. And then I think the very first thing is just, what am I seeing? You know, if you sort the data and it shows that, you know, this is the place that had the most numbers or the most people move to it, just ask, like, what am I seeing here? What could this mean? Again, look at the data dictionary, make sure that you understand what the numbers are actually referring to, and ask if it makes sense or if it tracks with other things you know about that specific region, and different articles or different stories that have been written in the past. Does it make sense that a lot of Black residents are moving to Florissant? And if it does, or if it fits into a trend, that's still a story. And if it doesn't, then that just changes the story that you might be thinking about. Again, yeah, what can this mean, and what does this indicate? Does this mean you know, people are, you know, that I already answered that. Of course, you want to look at the limitations. This goes back to, you know, deferential privacy. Is there any are there any ways that this data can be misleading or doesn't tell a full story? What other kinds of people, who else should I talk to, or what are the other sheets that I should look to make sure that I'm verifying that this is actually that this data is telling the story I think it is. And of course, it's always okay if the answer to these questions is I don't know, because you have experts, and they're the people who are going to help tell you what all of this information is, and will probably load up your brain with more information than you need. Of course, there are traditional experts. Those are your demographers, people who work with graphic informational systems, geospatial people, you know, basically any kind of map maker, or people who work with numbers to make maps. The Fed is also a really good resource because they work with numbers a lot, and they know very much about census and different trends. And of course, we have in-house experts. I know at St. Louis Public Radio, we have Brent Jones. Daniel Wheaton is a really wonderful data journalist as well, who, of course, I'm not trying to throw you under the bus here, Daniel, but these are people who I turn to when I look at a spreadsheet and I come up with an idea and I just want to double check it. And I say, you know, does this make sense? Is this what you're seeing? And if it's not, then what are you seeing? and what could, and how am I missing or not getting to the right place? These are also really important sources for developing a story. I talked to, you know, some demographers about just the general trends of what's going on, and they'll tell me very interesting things that they're working on, and things that can turn into stories. And they'll oftentimes share spreadsheets with me that make my life easier because I don't have to do the whole analysis. So these people are ones you can not in-house, but the other ones, the top four, are people who you can quote, people who you can include in stories, also you can include on background, and just have regular phone calls with, and they become very important in having a beat on what's happening. Of course, there are also non-traditional experts, and that's what I think of as the people who are going to get you to the story in the community that you want to write about. Of course, the community organizers are really important in this. Anybody who's doing work regarding housing or the environment, or like economic development, These organizations can be really, really helpful because oftentimes your story or the numbers will touch on some of the work that they're doing. And that actually will help build a more vibrant and rich story. If you can say that this demographic group is moving to this part of the state or this part of the region, there is likely to be some sort of community-based or community-based organization whose work either is exactly what your article is about or touches on it. And those are really wonderful resources because you can check if, one, if your reporting is actually reflective of what they're seeing, and two, they can connect you to people on the ground who make the best, who make stories, who you can talk to, and will make the stories really pop out because they have a strong anecdote that can be supported by the data that you have. Churches and
Eric, if I recall, sometimes people who are on the ground, they already know this stuff because they see it every day. Like they may not have the census data, but they're already moving in the direction of what their community needs and what they're seeing. And so it can be really interesting when you go and say, did you know that 10,000 Black people moved into Florissant? They'll be like, yes, we already did. That sounds about right. And here's what we're doing around that. I think that's another really important piece of it. And that sort of that story in Maryland Heights was from the Post-Dispatch about the Indian-born community was interesting that way too. So anyway.
Yeah, and one of the things that's really important is that when I approach these kinds of organizations, I usually look at it from like, this is something that I'm seeing in the data. Is this something that you're also seeing? And can you tell me about it? And that's on the next slide. The churches, faith-based organizations are really good, especially in the Black community here. They're wonderful places where you can connect with people and just talk about the idea that you're working on and make sure that it's something that is that's reflective of what's going on. Of course, there are minority-focused organizations, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, there's the Missouri Asian American Youth Foundation. Those are organizations that are specifically meant to represent their community. And of course, you have past sources, and this can be ones who you've talked to or ones in other articles that you can reach out to and ask to have an initial conversation about something that you're working on.
Another thing that's interesting too is getting to know your demographic experts early and before the census or before a big drop of data comes, because, for example, our go-to in St. Louis is a great professor at St. Louis University named Ness Sandoval. And he knew last year, or even maybe a little bit before that looking at the data, because the census puts out data every year as well, not just every 10 years, but he knew that the largest foreign-born population in St. Louis was going to shift from Mexican to Indian before the census came out based on what was tracking. And sure enough, that's what happened. So we were able to do that story last year. And sure enough, that is what happened. So if you find those people, universities are of course great, but find those experts in your area and sort of start to cultivate them, as an ongoing part of what you're doing, because in between the 10-year censuses, they will be, there's other data that they'll be generating that they don't wait for a census. They're looking at these tracks, they're looking at all kinds of geospatial, they're doing all kinds of things that could be really interesting between censuses, and they are going to know what's coming as well. So
yeah. Demographers look at, they like the census a lot, but they also look at births, deaths, and migration data, which gives them a lot of insight into what's going to come down the pike and what to look out for. And that's what I always ask Ness about is, what are you looking out for? What are you concerned about? Of course, I don't think I need to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. You don't know everything. And that's especially important for communities that are outside of your own personal background. So when I'm meeting with sources about either in the Hispanic community, the Black community, the Asian community here, I will often say, please correct, like I will lead off something. I'll say, this is my impression, and please correct me if I'm wrong about this. Because that serves two purposes. One, it shows that you understand that they are better experts at their own community than you are. And two, it offers it's trust building, and it offers a way for them to just say what is actually going on. And if you are wrong about it, like that's okay. You don't want it's better to be wrong about it like off the record or in an interview and be corrected than have it be published in an article and lose that credibility with that specific demographic, especially if they're one that has been traditionally underserved by the government, by the media, etc. Again, I can't say this enough. Data dictionaries, they are your friend. They are your guide to what the data actually means and says, and they just really help a lot. Again, please
Hey,
don't.
Eric?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you recommend a step-by-step YouTube tutorial? Oh, Daniel Wheaton just put that resource in the chat. Thanks, Daniel. And I don't think I'm stepping out of line here, Dan, to say that Eric, Daniel, and/or Brent Jones would be happy to also answer your questions at some point for basic information. And yeah, Mary Jo's great. And so please do use your colleagues in the Midwest here, and that goes for everybody, to ask your questions, play around. Can you share, Eric, the URLs for those two, that source that you shared where you go to for all your for a lot of your spreadsheets earlier?
Oh yeah.
Put that in the chat for me. This recording, of course, will be available, but I want to put that in the chat as well.
This one. Okay.
Yes.
So it's
Big Local News.
Yeah, it's called Big Local News, and it's under open projects, and it's like the 2020 census.
Great.
Where is how do I do this? Goodness me. There's that. And
Excellent.
I usually find my data too. I will ask the demographers to all right, let's get it. Okay. Of course, also just remember differential privacy and how that might affect your data. And of course, I think the last thing I would say is some of the best reports that I've read. There's a really great environmental racism in St. Louis report, and they correlate census demographic information by tract, and they overlay it with like health data, air pollution data, and other kinds of other kinds of information that are by tract, to show like the parts of St. Louis that have more Black residents have worse health outcomes, and it's like for these reasons, or this is what the data show. And then like I think that's the basis for a really, really interesting story where you can go further and say, does this extend to the county? Does this extend to the whole region? And understanding if certain pockets of a community where there are more racial minorities or ethnic minorities, do they have different health outcomes, and what might be a reasoning there? And that way you can also build up a story that is more than just experiences and anecdotes. You actually have the information and the data to say, this is someone's personal experience, and also we have the data to show that it's not just them. It's not just their life, but it's it's representative of other people in the community. And that's it. Thank you for entertaining me for an hour. I hope this was helpful. I know there was a lot that I covered, but I think the main thing that I want to get across is that we tell stories about people, And this data can help us get to those stories and get into the meat of why and how our region looks, or your region looks the way that it does. And I think those are the most fun stories, because you get to get into the community and you get to talk to people who are interesting and who are really committed to the work that they're doing. And that I find that really fun and really rewarding. And you get to learn so much about different areas. And of course, are there any other questions, anything that I can answer?
I shared your email in the chat, Eric. I took the liberty there of sharing too, in case people think of questions later. And if you think about your calendar year, there could be excellent opportunities to think about mining census data, things like, okay, it's time to file income taxes. Is there an income story? Is there a tax-based story that can be done, looking at the census information? And there's a lot of different ways to think about this outside of that 10-year. You haven't missed the boat if you didn't do a bunch of census stories a couple of months ago. There's just a lot there. Or you may be working on a different type of people's story, but census data can help you illustrate what's happening there. So a lot of great stuff there. Take your local demographer out for coffee now, just to get to know them, or do a Zoom meeting. Great information. And a lot of them are just very passionate about the people behind the data too. So that's kind of an interesting twist. But Eric, thank you so much. And all the preparation you put in, we so appreciate it.
Sure.
Again, this was recorded, so I will be sharing it out once we get done. And I put in the chat a feedback form, if you don't mind filling that out, to tell us how things went, because we want to make sure that we are hitting the mark with our trainings. And we also have a calendar in, I also posted a link to our calendar in the chat, so you can see what else is coming. But as you know, I will always be reminding everybody of our trainings going forward. So with that, I'll say thank you so much for joining us. And Eric, thanks again.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming. Very much appreciate y'all staying with.
Yes, we had a very high retention rate, Eric. That's awesome. Okay, thanks everybody. Cheers. I'm gonna stop recording.
All right. Ooh.